Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this evening's meeting of the Warrant Committee. We have a very full agenda, and we have a very distinguished group of people. If this were a television program, I'd say a distinguished group of panelists, but since this is us asking them questions and not the reverse, we'll leave it there. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes of last Monday's meeting. You've all received them electronically. Do we have any amendments, changes, modifications, etc.? Hearing none. I'm sorry?
Motion approved.
Perfect. We have to make the motion. Okay, we have a motion. It's been seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a challenge ahead as we have to find some money to take out of the budget to keep it in balance to present to the town meeting. So with that in mind, we have the school committee chair and the superintendent. We have our town administrator. We have the chief of fire and police. And is Chase here tonight, DPW?
He may be joining us.
Okay, that's fine. As it is the school department which has the largest budget component, I think it may be wise to hear from them first. I mean, please, Kevin and Mary, you're welcome, or whoever is presenting. I should ask who's presenting.
Mike, did you want to speak first?
Mike,
If I might, Mr.
yeah,
Chairman,
please,
so,
please.
yeah, just
You can begin. You did send around a sheet for us to look at, which we are grateful for. But why don't you cover
Sure.
what you had in mind?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We had a very productive week last week, culminating in a meeting on Friday with my finance subcommittee, Selectwoman Collins, who is over my left shoulder, Selectwoman Conlon, and some members of the school committee, as well as the administrators and town accountant. So, long story short, we're starting to make progress on the shortfall.
Mm-hmm.
I did disseminate a list of town identified cuts. Additionally, for those viewing at home, we had a $2.8 million unbalance in FY20 budget preliminarily. Again, still waiting for the House Ways and Means and Senate budgets to come. We spent the majority of the time going over the dollar amounts of the cuts. So I disseminated a list of cuts from the town side and drilled down roughly $565,000 we've identified in reductions from the FY20 submission that was made to this committee in December. The schools have identified $975,000 of reductions to their original submission. And then additionally, we took some steps to take another crack at some of the revenue. I spoke last week to this committee about how revenue restricted we are in town. So there are some initiatives that we're trying to identify and drill down to capture some more revenue for the town. So with some discussions with Chase Berkeley from Public Works and his team, Hillary Waite, the environmental coordinator, chief of police, we've identified some ballpark numbers where we can add some revenue to the town. I spoke last week about the trash barrel initiative. Conservatively, we pegged that at $150,000 increase year over year for going to a $156 annual trash bill, ordering barrels and delivering them to residents that don't opt out, if that sounds correct. Additionally, we spoke to the chief if this board and town meeting should approve the parking enforcement officer. Again, not a punitive position, but more a position of compliance so that we can get, people places to park, but also move them throughout the town so that the businesses can maximize the opportunity there. If the parking enforcement officer should be funded, it's a part-time position, roughly a little over $19,000 salary. 2 tickets per hour would net approximately $25,000 in additional revenue. Again, with the premise that we're not out here to try to, chase money, but if people are not in compliance and parking longer than their extended or posted welcome, that's a source of revenue we could identify. So we did walk through a series of revenue initiatives. If there's any questions from the town side, if you've had a chance to take a look at the $565,000 we've identified there, or any school questions related to the school department, they're obviously here to, the school committee members, Superintendent Gormley, and Assistant Superintendents Pavlicek and Shan. But the gist of it is, we've identified almost $1.5 million of the $2.8 million shortfall. Myself, the Assistant Town Administrator, and the Town Accountant met with 5 of our largest town departments today to go through a series of second reductions. So it was preliminary in nature, but we're heading down that road.
Mike, I think what we really want to project to the town is that it's not a question of town departments asking for the moon. This overage in the budget was largely driven by health insurance premiums.
Yeah, and
Vast majority of it was a 16% increase in health insurance premiums that the town is obliged to pay under its contractual obligations to its employees, and that's in nobody's control. That's set by the insurance gods. And this was not a malfeasance or negligence or otherwise grab for money on the department of the town. It was something that just is the normal course. We all see insurance rates going up for different reasons. So this is one thing I want to impress. This is the town having to cut back as a result of these increases that are really beyond our control.
Sure, and that's a piece of the puzzle, yeah. And if you take a family plan in Milton, costs the taxpayers $18,000. Add 16% onto that, and you're looking at $21,000 per employee that
That's
opts
a lot
into
of
the family
balloons.
plan.
So
It is. It can be a budget buster. There are some other things. We talked about the useful life recording and what that's going to cost the town in the next couple of years operationally. But we're really starting to think outside the box, trying to rethink, some of the ways in which we're going to use free cash.
Yes.
Understanding that free cash isn't always there, and it might not be the best decision to use it for operational. There is some money that we had talked about setting aside
Yes.
to identify the issue with the useful life in the next
Right.
2 fiscal years after this year, so.
Tom, did you have a question?
Yeah, so Mike, do we have any detail on, what the specific cuts were on town side, school side?
Yeah,
And
I disseminated that. Yeah.
all I see is this one, the only thing I got was this.
Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah, I sent that sheet around last Tuesday morning.
Can you remind me what the title of that is, please?
Let
Let me just check.
I don't have that.
Preliminary town reductions?
Yes, probably. Did you get it, Gwendolyn?
I have that.
Yeah.
I have it.
I have it,
Copy
but
of
it
it.
doesn't
Town
have
size,
the,
it's
Yeah.
a
it doesn't have the
school
backup. So you do want me to send that one as well?
Yeah, just
It looks like
Tom, I
that.
don't know how you
No?
missed that one. I'm
No.
sorry about it.
Okay. I thought I sent that
This?
sheet.
Oh, no, that's different.
This is right, it's right here.
It
It was earlier than this one?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the budget.
Oh,
Lynn.
he sent
It's
us
a
the
specific
5th of
spreadsheet.
March.
It's
Fifth
this.
of March. Oh, yeah.
And we'll further refine this as we identify additional reductions as we meet.
Let me just.
See it?
Just send, when you get it, you can send it around, because everybody will be interested to have that. If they don't, I thought everybody did have it.
Yeah?
Okay, does anyone have any questions at this point for our administrator?
Should we have an IT subcommittee, or who's reviewing like amongst ourselves here?
We were just going to review that generally, because it wasn't as large a piece that we set up a subcommittee for
Because I have
example.
I have a
Okay.
couple questions on that. I should say, my prior employer was Citrix, so a little bit of background is cloud computing. I noticed here that you have both delaying server upgrades and cloud-to-cloud backup. What kind of server, do we have both on-prem servers and use of the cloud at this point?
Yes, what they normally do, I think there's 3 servers that they deploy. They replace one, they try to replace one every year so that they don't run into that problem.
And why have on-prem servers at all instead of cloud? Just moving to an all-cloud server so that you don't have, because I imagine there's salaries associated with maintaining the servers.
Yeah, so we have, it's 2 employees. One of the employees actually works part-time. Half of his time is spent at the police department.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't answer that question without Jim Seguri being here.
Okay.
I know they're moving towards the cloud. There was the investment made in Office 365 and the OneDrive, which we're trying to deploy townwide, but,
Okay, and that might be an area, and I'm sorry to, if you don't have the expertise in it, but the delay cloud to cloud backup, it sounds like they're doing like a double backup on the cloud, having cloud servers and then backing that up in a second instance. And that seems, if you have both on-prem servers and a cloud to cloud backup, it might be,
duplicative.
yeah, a little
Yeah.
redundant.
Let me, town accountant was in during our talks with them. Do you remember, Amy, what, about this? Yeah. Yeah. I'll get you that answer. Yeah.
It's a little nitty gritty, but that might be, in looking through, that's one area where there's, somewhat larger dollars, and it may also be something that you can shift away from recurring expenses, to be a lifetime savings, which would be a good thing.
Okay. I'll certainly get you that answer. I apologize.
Any other questions at this point?
Yes.
Please.
On the library, I noticed just now that we're closing on Sundays, and most families are home on Sundays. So I'm wondering if there's a reason why we're closing on Sundays instead of closing at like Tuesday from 9 to noon, when people aren't using the library as much.
I think the Sunday closure is purely overtime. I think Sunday isn't part of the work week. Whereas
So,
there are,
but if we
there's
schedule
two
our work
shifts at the
weeks-
library.
But if we schedule our weeks different, and we schedule them in such a way where we don't have to lose a Sunday. So many people I know work shift work, and they work Sunday through Thursday, or they work Friday through whatever. I'm just,
No, I hear what you're saying, that whether they do flexible shifts and,
it's the families that live here that utilize that service, and so I'm very concerned about that.
yeah, I echo your
Very.
sentiment, yeah. And this was something that we talked about during the override 2 years ago when I
Exactly,
first
we
sat
all
here.
voted for it.
Right.
So.
You would probably have to bargain that if you did it.
I don't
Yeah,
think
there
so.
might be union
Stop it.
obligations.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah.
we'd
Are
have
you
to- For
guys
Sundays.
serious? Dead- dead serious.
Yeah.
Sunday would be overtime, maybe
Yeah,
overtime.
I don't know how you get around that, because I
But
think
it's
that's
a-
We'd
contractual.
have to ask a library trustee.
So basically, so,
12
so the families understand that they are, I mean, we're losing the only other day for how much, 12,000?
$12,000
Right.
savings. It doesn't, the library budget was pretty tight when we
Yeah,
saw that
it was tight.
presentation.
Right.
I mean, it seems like it would be better if there was another place to make up that $12,000. I would agree.
Yeah, so Will has done a thorough exercise, and that, one of the other, probably one of the next reductions we talked to Will about is Saturdays. That's the next step, is closing a
That would be
portion of the
very
Saturdays.
unfortunate, because loads of people use the library on Saturdays.
Can we renegotiate it? I mean,
I don't know, on the short term, I don't think that's a possibility. Mike, one thing I wanted to ask you about, you had said that we're still waiting on revenue figures from the state.
Right.
Magnitude of anything that might come in, are we waiting, is this going to be Christmas in April, or what?
Yeah, so the House Ways and Means should be out soon, and last year we saw almost $200,000 increase. Unfortunately, we saw a $100,000 increase in our assessment, so it netted out to about 100. There's no person on a horse with a white flag coming in to save the day.
All right, well,
But
okay.
at this point in time, every dollar counts. If you take everything on the paper that we've talked about with the 975 from schools and the 565 from the town, we have eliminated $1.5 million from that. Add in the revenues that we're conservatively adding to the table, and we're short approximately $600,000 at this time, by adding some revenue sources and identifying cuts both on the town and school side, or reductions, if you will.
May I ask a question?
Please.
I'm looking at the fire cuts under salary and wages, and there's $35,000 for personal day buyback. Is there are we eliminating personal day buyback? Is there some contractual change that's,
No, so that's an estimation, so they're contractually obligated to earn a personal day each. If they have a good quarter, they have the potential to earn 4 more,
okay,
right? And over time, they've been used and not purchased back.
okay.
So Chief Grant felt that it was comfortable, he comfortably could reduce it because more people are using the day
I see.
than buying the day back.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Thank
that
you.
would be something to look at as a further reduction should we get there, because more often than not, the day it's contractually obligated, if earned.
From a cash management point of view, we're looking at a budget of over $100 million. We're talking 600,000 out of sync. Is there a possibility of manipulating payments or not filling positions as quickly as we could to delay some of the expenditures into another year? Or is that, I know it's a little bit of sleight of
Well,
hand
the
and
problem with that is you would have to do away with the
positions?
You can't have an unbalanced budget, so you would have to fund the position at zero to accomplish that. Wouldn't work otherwise.
wouldn't work. Okay, I'm just trying to think.
Even though you're not filling the position,
Yeah,
it doesn't
right.
matter.
If the cash isn't there, it doesn't matter. It's on books. We have to make it look like it's balanced. Okay, that's fine. I just needed that. Thank you.
And again, it's a fast-moving current, and there are discussions ongoing every day to further reduce. Met with the fire chief, police chief, consolidated facilities, DPW director. Parks commissioners are meeting tomorrow. They're going to take up some issues tomorrow, and I'll sit down with them on Wednesday. But it's a much better picture than it was this time last week, but, you know, the clock is ticking and the book has to go to print and
Yes.
you know, we have to get into balance, so some harder decisions are probably in the future. I mean, I know last week we talked a lot about free cash and what to do with it, and the upside and downside of using it for operational uses. I mean,
I don't think it's anybody's first choice.
Right. Right.
Okay. Any other questions for our town administrator? Christine?
I'm sort of trying to catch up on the detail. Do we have something from the schools? I'll look at what the
No,
school.
not yet.
I'd be interested to hear what
Yeah.
we're giving up at the schools.
You guys want to jump up? or-
Well,
Oh,
let's,
sorry,
yeah.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I thought we
Yeah.
had a spreadsheet.
Right. Parks and Rec, the moving seasonal to recreational revolving, if allowed, okay?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if that's gonna be allowed or not. So you're moving a position to revolving?
To the revolving.
Has there been any discussion with either the cemetery or Parks and Recs in terms of consolidating? I mean, this would be the time to do it.
There has and there will be more. I talked to, Rick Neely left me a voicemail, the Town Government Study Committee. It's one of the things they're going to look into. I met with the Parks Commissioners in February and voiced my opinion that I voiced last year, that there is room for consolidation. I would not consolidate cemeteries. I'd consolidate public works. I'd consolidate parks operations with either public works or consolidated facilities. If you can imagine the town, Public Works owns the street and sidewalks, and consolidated facilities basically and parks own everything outside of that,
Yeah.
within our realm. So it would be a natural transition. I think the recreation department stands alone. And I
Yeah,
think-
recreational activities
Yeah.
is separate from maintenance of fields and.
Right. But yeah, that discussion, I had that discussion myself and the town, assistant town administrator with the Parks Commissioners in February, and it's on their agenda for tomorrow, the Parks Director position.
Okay. If this is the case, then we should move on to the schools. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
I'll be here if you need me.
Yep, thanks, appreciate
Thanks.
it. We have Dr. Donahue, Dr. Pavlicek, Superintendent Gormley from the school department. This is more or less it. She just sent it around. Thank you for coming. So we have reductions discussed at $975,000 from the budget submitted in December. Do you want to detail a little bit more of how they're going to be handled,
Sure.
Dr. Pavlicek?
Basically, the request from the school department had the fixed costs of rolling over the current employees and then had a variety of different positions that we were looking to add on. The short answer is, other than the two elementary school kindergarten, we call them positions that we need for enrollment next year, we're taking all the others off the table. So and some of these are difficult. The language-based program at the middle school has the potential to save money with the addition of that faculty, or that teacher who could provide some language-based special needs services that might prevent some out-of-district placements. But it is a seed money for it. We need to create the position first, the the intent of either bringing someone back or at least some cost avoidance of sending future people out, students out at the middle school level. We have some students who are, on the track to be outplaced for lack of the ability for us to service them at the middle school. So that's a fairly a cut we're very reluctant to make because of the potential for cost avoidance.
Is that particular cut included in the 975,000?
The 975, it is.
It is.
It is.
And what is the magnitude of that?
That's
item?
$85,000.
85.
The 2 teachers at the high school that we were looking to add for enrollment, we won't. If you just look at our presentation of the various different things, essentially it's the rollover of existing staff plus 2 elementary teachers for the increased enrollment in the elementary school, and really that's it. In terms of the non-personnel parts of the ask, we've gone so far as to look at the supply lines. We had built in a 1% cost of living, not cost of living, inflationary increase for supply lines. We backed it up. I left it in for utilities. I left it in for special ed Medicaid costs because there's no way that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll on the text materials and supplies, we'll level dollar those budgets. Beyond that, we did one reevaluation of our special education out of district costs, which are huge, of course. As it turns out, we have one very expensive out of district placement who moved out of town. So we are doing a reduction in the special ed out of district budget to the tune of about $300,000. But it's a cost. When we put the budget together, we didn't know we weren't going to incur, but they have moved. And the language of special ed out of district placements is if you've moved before April 1st of the year, your costs go to the next district.
Wow.
If you move after April 1st, the sending district keeps the cost for another year, even though you've moved. So that was an adjustment in the special ed out of district line.
And
That's
included
included
in
in
the
the
975.
975. We also increased some of our indirect cost chargebacks to operations like the community schools. We charge them for a portion of the custodial services that they use. We charge them for a portion of the, not so much heat in the summer, but electricity that they consume when they're using our buildings in the summer. We get indirect cost for a portion of the principal's time, because they're in the principal's building, on the administrative assistant's time, and so forth. So we increased our charge back to those operations. Currently, the community schools is about a $1.5 million operation annually. This would increase our indirect cost to them to the order of about 14 or 15%, which is not unreasonable as a percentage of operations. So that's included in here as well. That adds the better part of another $100,000 to it. And additionally, we're trying to look at a small reorganization of some of our administrative staff, just in terms, not necessarily of layoffs, but of reorganizing how we do things and trying to save some money on that. That's not a lot of money in there, so, and we haven't talked to people individually about it, so I don't think I'll go into more detail than that at the moment, but that is also included in the 975. So that's how we drew back from our initial request to where it sits right now.
And if I just might add, in this world of special education, where you live April 1st, again, the district that you live in owns that special ed tuition. But if you move during the year, in a second level of tuition costs are these collaboratives where we belong to the social collaborative. There are different collaboratives across the state. Those transfer. So if you moved in October, the cost for that special ed placement would transfer. But in the world of special education, we gave this a lot of thought. We know by April 1st, anyone who moves in after April 1st who's an out-of-district placement will be charged to the sending district. So that just shows all the districts across the state are watching these. And we know internally, there's nobody going to an out-of-district. So it was volatile looking at 300,000 in sped because we explained to you sped transportation and sped costs. But we know that this is going to be a savings.
May I ask a question? You've backed out all the personnel increase requests with the exception of 2 kindergarten teachers, which we expect to be necessary to handle increased volume. My daughter's kindergarten class has 2 teachers. I mean, one's an assistant. Are we not doing that for the new classes? Is that?
No, kindergarten classes have a teacher, well, one kindergarten class is a co-taught, which has 2 teachers in it, two licensed certified teachers, for its, has students with special needs in it as well. The other kindergarten classes are taught by a teacher and a .8 instructional assistant.
Okay, that's who I mean. So we're not planning to provide those for the new classes? Because you're only requesting 2 teachers.
We would, technically, only one of the 2 right now we have 15 fifth grades that are rolling off this year. They're moving up to 6th grade. We have 17 kindergartens rolling on. We currently have 16 kindergartens, so we call it 2 kindergarten teachers. Really, 1 kindergarten teacher and 1 somewhere else in the middle where a smaller class is rolling up to a larger class. We will have to reorganize somehow to get an 8 in that other kindergarten class because it will have a .88. But it's easier to say 2 kindergarten teachers rather than try to figure out it's 1 and then there's people shuffling all over the place. That other one may end up being a 3rd grade teacher to fill a gap, but it's net 2 in the elementary school.
So
And we
you
just-
don't need an additional .8 aid?
We're looking at reorganizing our aides. That's a volatile group between special ed needs and the kindergarten needs. We have 90 aides in the district currently. We're hoping we can be able to rearrange services and provide that extra kindergarten aid without an extra body.
Thank you.
And to your point about these kindergartens, full-day kindergartens should be 18 to 22.
Right.
So we've gone up to 24. And then with these special needs classes, we went to one meeting and somebody kept saying to me, there are 29 children in their elementary class. And I said, I don't have a 29. But when I researched it, for part of the day, children from these separate classes are integrated in. And they come in with a paraprofessional or sometimes a teacher. So in these full-day kindergartens, we've gone up to 24, you know. And we actually talked when we were discussing this about, do we eliminate the paraprofessionals in the full-day kindergartens? And they all agreed that that would be impossible in the world of kindergarten to have 24.
I don't know how the 2 of them manage 24, 5, and 6-year-olds.
So we did reduce them to .8. And when we talked to you about these lunchroom aides, and so if you're in the schools, you understand these paras with the kindergartens stay with the kindergartens during lunch.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Please go ahead.
How about the enrollment on the Blue Hill Regional School? Is that, I mean, I recall that going up.
It's down this year, which is good news on the Blue Hills budget.
Yeah.
That's we're happy to have them, but there are fewer children going into the Blue Hills Regional this year than were last year. There's 37 versus 44 or something like this.
Right.
So their enrollment is down a bit. Frankly, my guess is that they see a building project. And I remember when we had a building project, we had people decide they didn't want their children in construction areas, and say they took them out for a few years and then they came back. I think it could happen with the Blue Hills. We don't know. When the brand-new building opens up down there, that might be more attractive, and we may get more enrollment in Blue Hills. Our enrollment in Norfolk County Agricultural School is up. We're at 7. That's the largest we've ever been, to my knowledge, for Norfolk Aggie. It's usually been 1 or 2 for the last couple of years. Now we have 7 currently enrolled in Norfolk Agriculture.
In the food services section of the budget, there is money that carries over. Is that limited to just food services, or can that be used for other
Oh, it's
means?
very limited to food services. FDA regulations on food service budget are brutal, to be honest. Every time we have a meeting and the food services sends up a case of water and a coffee cake, I have to pay the food services budget out of our budget because it's technically catering, and food service money can't be used for anything but serving children. So I do a
Serving
lot.
them food or serving children?
We're not cannibals.
Explain to Ms. Cassis what you said about whatever you do to that program, you'd have to do like to the SPED grant?
There's a question that said, can you take indirect costs off the food service program? Technically, you can charge an indirect cost, but then you have to do it to every federal grant that you get, including the, $1.4 million grant for special ed aids, early childhood aids. So you might gain a little money there, but you'd lose it on the other side. It turns out, the only way we can really charge off to the food service, and we do, if they have dedicated employees. So the people who serve food, they have a half-time driver who drives around to the various and delivers things to the various different schools when they come into the high school and so forth. Because that's a direct charge to food service, that's allowed. But indirect charges are, you have to do it to
Talk about
all
this
of your
all the
different.
time. And it's interesting,
organizations.
when we interviewed for Dr. Pavlicek's position and his predecessors, we interviewed business managers from across the state, and we have one of the few programs that makes money. And I found myself saying to them, you mean you use your text material and supply money to pay to feed the children? And so we have a program that's very successful. But as the facility subcommittee say, because the school building project all happened at the same time, all the stoves are gonna go, at the same time. And so so when you see that amount,
Yeah.
for those, years ago, we had one kitchen and you sent the food out. Every school has a kitchen. So now there's money that we will never have to go to the town for.
So this can be a rainy day fund for when those start to go?
And 15, 16 years, some of them are starting. We've had a couple freezers go in the last couple of years, a couple of walk-ins, and so the food service budget takes care of their own capital, essentially.
Wish we had a rainy day budget for other things. So the question of the hour, based on what our town administrator has told us, where there's $600,000 still to be milked from somewhere, given that the school department is 2/3 of the town budget, if this committee attributed 2/3 of the reduction to the school department, where would you cut if you had to?
Personnel.
It would be personnel.
And is there room in the, we have to ask these questions, we're obliged to. Where would those cuts come? In personnel particularly. I know that there are issues of tenure and there are issues of longevity, et cetera,
So
that you
what's-
can't violate.
Mike Dennehy mentioned, it's been very successful. The school and the town's finance subcommittee have met now 4 times? 4 times for lengthy Friday mornings, going over both budgets and working collaboratively, Amy Dexter, Mike Dennehy, Glenn and myself. And so we've spent a tremendous amount of time. It's shown us the town budget even better. And so we're to the point that it would have to be personnel. I can't tell you tonight where those positions would be or who those positions would be. And we don't, before we go to these finance subcommittees, we meet with our finance subcommittee and get their vote, and then they get the school committee vote. But it would be personnel.
For a ballpark number, if you're talking 2/3 of $600,000 or $400,000,
Right.
you're talking basically six
6, that's what I guess.
staff.
I guess it would be about half a dozen,
Yep.
which is something we all want to avoid, obviously.
And one analogy, when we were talking about reductions at the elementary level, we have 2 technology teachers. Again, 3rd graders take MCAS online.
Yeah.
And so the principals were saying these 2 technology teachers, put so much ease among the teachers, and then the children can do better. And so I said to the elementary principals, if you have to make cuts, and we have meetings with them, and the elementary principals looked at me and said, well, there are no other people to eliminate. We have, reading specialists and math specialists were, as a result of the override, but there are no other people and so it sort of took me back. I identified these technology positions, and they said they are huge, 2 for 2,000 children.
So, I'm sorry, just to interject as well, in the past, what we've done is we've asked the administration, if you're talking about personnel cuts, the school committee has asked the administration to discuss with their leadership team what those cuts would be and to give us an idea of what personnel would be affected. They present to the school committee, and then the school committee makes the decision about how to tier those and where the cuts are made. We, as the superintendent indicated, we typically try, in fact, we do try to start with administrative personnel and then move into classroom support personnel and then classroom personnel, generally speaking, but I'm sure I think with 6 FTEs, we'd be into personnel who have face-to-face contact with children, if we're talking about these cuts at that level, so.
How do you balance that? I mean, I have so many questions, and I'm gonna try and just rein it in a little bit, but y'all know me, so I may not. So,
Yes, but I will make sure you
thank
know.
you so much, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. So, I'm just curious, you know, I've sat and I've listened to, all of you tell me that, we need another school. And so here we are, and we're looking at cutting, possibly, let's call it 4 FTEs. Let's just call it that, right? Can you explain to me a little bit about what exactly our tax dollars went to for the 2.5? Because that's gonna be a question A. And then B, I'm only gonna ask 2. B, can you tell me out of the, I'm guessing you're 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 that you're cutting, so 1/3 of, you know, sped, hold on, 1/3 of sped, 1/3 of, other, and 1/3 of not hiring new people, right? Roughly. I wanna know what the other is. Because I want to know what's going on with those other classes that are not geared just towards the MCAS. And so I want to know 2 questions. 1, what did our tax dollars go to 2 years ago? And why is it that I'm now looking at a budget that's going to cut 4 possible FTEs? And B, what are the other classes that we're about to lose that's not geared towards MCAS? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good question.
What did well, part of the answer, what did your tax dollars go to?
Don't
is-
ask me because I just did it.
is health insurance.
It's okay. So
You've got a
health
$12
insurance.
million health insurance budget for the town, and it's looking at a 16% increase. That's just unsustainable,
Yeah, they're totally-
We
period.
mentioned this earlier, that of the 2.8 million, 1.9 was the increase in the health insurance premium we pay.
This is insane.
We all know that, but it's reality and we
So,
face it.
if you had to give a short answer, that's
Yeah.
the short
Yeah.
answer.
Okay.
That's,
And
Okay.
nobody could project that. Nobody could
We
have
already
projected
cut
that.
the increase to it.
and it's
And are we
one
gonna
of these things,
cut-
because we're self-insured, and I'll leave this to the
So,
town to
but
explain more.
are we gonna
but-
cut the other classes that aren't geared towards MCAS? Are we cutting those? Is that a possibility? Is that on the table?
It may not be cutting class, it may be increasing class size. You know, if you're cutting at the middle school and high school, you're likely to, you might not have things disappear. We try not to have things disappear, because when they disappear, it's hard to get them back.
Right.
So you try to leave a program somehow intact, so in better times or different times, you can bring it back. So, I mean, you're probably looking more at, frankly, I don't know where I'd go with the elementary, but for instance, the high school, it's certainly a question of increased class size.
Okay.
And the middle school is a little harder because of the team structure to play out how exactly that works. In past, we've had cuts where we took a subject off team in one grade. For several years, history was off the 8th grade team. We had 2 history teachers instead of 3. And so we had to rejigger the teams, and so when you had a team meeting, you didn't necessarily meet your history teacher because they were doing other duties. So it can have effects like that. So there are different ways it can play out at different levels of the system.
Thank you for that.
Dr. Donahue, you had something
I was
to
going
say.
to say, based on past practices, if you recall, one of the cuts that we made in the lead up to the override several years before, it was we moved some of the elective time at the elementary level. We went from 45-minute electives to 30-minute electives. That was universally disliked. And when
Get out of that.
we were able to restore that elective time, not only was it met with applause from the parent community and the teacher community, but the administrators who are tasked with using that administrative time to do,
Anything.
development and team planning, they all had tremendous praise for it. So it would be things like that. conceivably.
Thank you.
Wendy?
Have there been additional discussions or considerations of special education transportation since we last spoke?
I talk about it all the time to anyone who will listen.
I know, but I haven't heard it in
Mr. Hurley
this
about it once.
format. Because just that line item, I think, is it 1.3 this year?
Yes.
It's very
It's
high.
1.3
Yeah.
million, so there's room for improvement there. So we had talked about potentially looking at the acquisition of a vehicle and whether that would be a significant enough cut to more than offset the cost to get those services from a third-party provider.
What's the statutory requirement? I mean, I assume that you have to have a dedicated vehicle. You can't have these kids calling Ubers or anything like that.
No, and you have to have
The
multiple
regular,
staff.
we won't go there. No, they have to be 7D licensed special ed vehicles with a 7D licensed driver and so forth. We could, you can buy a van. I mean, a van is $45,000 for a special ed van. Of course, that comes with it.
The driver, the insurance,
Maintenance.
all the other stuff.
It comes with it.
It's not just
Driver,
special
it
ed,
comes
though.
with it, a variety of different things.
Has that scenario been examined to see if that's a possibility, and is there a cost saving if you have done so?
We've looked at districts that do it, so they have to be cost savings, but there
Yeah.
has to be the will to, when I start talking about it, people don't want to get into the employees. I'm not worried about the maintenance. I think that we can find some place to maintain.
Yeah.
So we told Ms. Long that, like the Council on Aging, we had one van from the Copelands, and the savings that that's given us in athletics and field trips for groups that are under 12.
Yeah.
So what we'd like to do is if we had one van, we'd either take the route that's the furthest out, like we send 2 children to Providence, Rhode Island every day. And if we could prove a cost savings with that van, or do one van internally. We have, if you go by the schools, Glenn, how many internal vans do we have in SPED that go to the schools? I've seen up to 12 vans.
Oh,
So,
there's
30.
more than that. We
you've
transport
looked at
about
other districts.
65 children internal to Milton.
But you've looked at other districts, have you done a cost analysis in this district of of whether or not that would be a savings?
well, we're talking about it. And we're looking at the districts that have done it, what are the upside, again, it's an investment, an initial investment. You have to prove to the town, you have to do the
Yes,
comparative work.
But I think,
Capital
I
investment.
think
But
that
you have to
this is-
remember that when Glenn does the big yellow buses, that's a contract, but on the sped vans, they could up the cost tomorrow.
It's not possible to enter into a longer-term contract with these providers?
They're exempt from Chapter 32B of the
Yeah,
bid laws.
that's-
So it's not in their interest to enter into a longer-term contract necessarily either. I mean, they like the flexibility of being able to offer it. We do negotiate. We have 4 different vendors, and we play them off against each other to see who gives us the best in-town rates and who gives us the best per-mile rates on out-of-town service and so forth. Sometimes limited by the number of buses that particular vendor owns
Yeah.
or has available to us. So the administrative assistant in the special ed office is constantly, maneuvering our special ed routes to see if we can pair up with a student. If we're sending someone out to Lincoln, is Canton sending someone out to the same school in Lincoln? And can we pair up on a bus with them and share some of the cost that way? I mean, so it's a constant battle, but it is a moving target too.
Can I I think this is a larger picture, and for those of you that know about 766 schools and really what this means, it's something that the state needs to take a look at, and so while we can all have these minutia discussions, I really think it's something that we need to bring our delegation to. I've yet to see any of them at any meeting I've been at, besides the big town meetings. And I really think that this is a statewide issue, because we are not the only district that's dealing with this. And there is a federal law. We have to comply with this. So we can nickel and dime this, and we can spend the next 20 minutes talking about it. But the bigger picture is, what is our legislative delegation actually doing to fight for us to get some extra money, sped dollars,
Dedicated to this?
dedicated to transportation? And it's not just the sped kids, it's also the foster care kids. Like, there is a bigger picture here about transportation, and when McKinney-Vento changed, all of that funding changed. So this is not just something that we can say, okay, well, we can save 5% here and 2% here. Where is our delegation? And so, Mr. Chair, thank you for indulging.
No, I think it's a decent point, and I think it's a great existential discussion to have, but I think at the very minimum, looking at alternatives that might exist to even save 10 or 15 or 20,000 is far preferable to looking at personnel cuts.
One of the, if you're looking for the delegate, suggestions for the delegation, our out-of-district costs are subject to the circuit breaker reimbursement. So above a certain threshold, which is about $42,000 this year, the state is supposed to give us 75% reimbursement. It's not always
On the
fully
excess.
funded.
On the excess.
On the excess. And that's our circuit breaker payments every year. We build that into our budget. What they do not reimburse for in that computation are transportation costs. So they'll reimburse us on the tuition above that.
Right.
But really, part of the tuition is the transportation to get them there.
Absolutely.
And that's not reimbursed under circuit breaker. So if we were looking for a simple amendment to the law, which of course may mean they just fund less of the circuit breaker than they fund currently, but one simple amendment to the law would be say to roll transportation costs into the circuit breaker reimbursable balance. I mean, it's not a hard law to write. It might be hard to get passed, but I mean, it's not complicated language. Most people could understand it, and therefore might have a chance. But I mean, if you're looking for something to go with a legislative delegation, I'd pass that one along.
That's a good one. Thanks.
Right. Tom?
And nothing particularly to do with this budget, but just kind of related to the whole discussion in general. We're talking about bringing potentially 26 new classrooms on board for overcrowding. Assuming we find a way to finance the building, how do we finance the teachers?
That's an existential discussion.
It absolutely is.
And somebody's got to think about it sooner rather than later, because,
If we have this committee convened for the buildings, then those answers have to be made, and they're going to make some
One of the
people rather
discussions
uncomfortable.
that has played into, the two sort of, at the moment, front-runner options, which are a K-5 school and an early childhood center, is, in the case of an early childhood center, the personnel costs might be less, because you're moving those people over, you're using, you might be attaching it to a building, so maybe the principal would just have a coordinator to work on that, in that area. You might not have more maintenance costs, because you might not have to have a core of 3 or 4 custodians that you would have to have in a new building. You might have, so these are the sorts of discussions we're having.
Existing teachers.
And that's the sort of discussions that, the school committee is having, and we'll certainly move on to the school building committee, but they are absolutely considerations to be taken into account. A freestanding building has more personnel cost
absolutely.
than an extension of an existing. Right.
And I will say, to some extent, to a limited extent, we are starting to incorporate some of those costs into our budget now. We're designed for 14, we're running 17. So, potentially some of those FTEs, if you build a new space, you could distribute those. You could decompress some of the elementary schools that are running at 5 strands down to 4 or 3 and move those FTEs over. But the larger point of the balance is a dramatic balance. Yeah.
True, if we add a 4-unit school on, that means we're built for 18 strands throughout the system. We're going to have 17 kindergarten teachers next year, and 16 at most of the other grades. So a lot of it is redeployment, and then reclaiming art rooms and music rooms and various other rooms that have been sacrificed for teaching space. So it's not 24 new teachers, but it is some new teachers for sure. It's probably maybe 1 to 2 per grade. Maybe it's 8 or 9 to 10 teachers. But it is.
Yeah,
Massive redistricting.
And I think one of the other spaces that we really lack at the moment are full-size special education spaces at the elementary level. We're meeting our requirements, but having those full-size spaces can, for example, with that language program, enable you to do things that can potentially, bring some out-of-district placements in, or prevent them from leaving in the first place. So that's where some of the space would end up being reclaimed too.
And if you had space like that, we did at one point in the past, when we had some space in our program for the children on the autism spectrum, we actually tuitioned in a student from another town
Right.
into one of those empty spaces. So if you have the space, we could, because we're part of the South Shore Collaborative, we could open up a special ed classroom for other members of the collaborative to basically tuition into. So, there are options when you have more space. I mean, that was the huge part of the current, the past building project, where we went from 100 out-of-district students down to about 55. And we just had the space to service them. It wasn't that we didn't have the talent before we didn't have the space. And then that, the net effect is good all around, not only for us and our budget, but for those students who really should be in Milton as opposed to on a bus somewhere to somewhere else.
Absolutely, sure. Does anybody have any further questions? Because we should be moving along. I guess the recommended, getting the sense of what we've been discussing is that in the event that we do need to make additional recommendations for further reductions, which again, nobody wants, but we just have to be pragmatic about it, I would suggest having the internal uncomfortable but necessary discussion about where you would be able to eliminate a further $400,000. Because if we're looking at a $600,000 deficit and apportioning it appropriately, ratably anyway, we would look at that sort of a reduction for the schools extremely reluctantly, but I don't know that we have an alternative yet. We'll wait for the cavalry to come over the hill, but I don't see the dust cloud, so we just have to deal with what we've got. And I apologize for having to say that, but, that's the way it is.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Please.
Does the warrant committee have the authority to make recommendations on what to do with the budget?
How so?
So
You
let's
mean
say
in the
the budget's
specific line
presented,
items?
yes, let's say the budget is presented to us. Does the warrant committee have the authority to make our own decisions about specific line items?
To a limited degree. For example, the schools are a bottom line budget.
Right.
So we
well,
can't tell them how to
yes.
spend.
You can't tell them how to,
Yes.
And
allocate
then the
it
rest of the
internally.
town is personnel and general expense.
So,
So really
Within
no.
general expense, you can't tell them how to spend their money.
right.
So really, no. So
Well,
the-
we also recommend to the town meeting, and they make the decision, so it isn't exactly our
Right.
decision.
But it's our warrant.
It is our recommendation on the warrant article, and they can take it or leave it.
Okay.
And that's why we have so many delightfully spirited and enlightening
That's
discussions
fabulous.
at town meeting.
Just trying to get the procedure down.
Yes, 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 but we have the responsibility to at least ask these questions. Not that they won't be asked 15 times at town meeting, again, but we still have the obligation to ask them and to make sure that we have looked under all the rocks with the people who have constructed the budget. And we know you do a great job. It's a very difficult thing to do. And let's just hope for the best as we go forward. Tom?
And just a quick closing. The one thing I would like to see from all the departments is to start thinking about getting us some written impact statements, both from the town side.
Oh, yeah.
Because
I
that'll
think
help
it's
as we
gonna be-
draft.
Yeah.
Because we need some things, but that has to happen very quickly because we have to start drafting in the next 10 days. Actually, we have to be finished drafting in the next 10 days or so, more or less. So if there are no other questions, thank you very much, Dr. Donahue, Dr. Pavlicek, Superintendent Gormley. We have also Chief Grant and Chief King and Chase Berkeley from DPW. I don't want to presume on your time, so I'll ask which of you wants to go next. Does anybody under pressing, commuting, or whatever,
Chase has
it's
a
more
long-
convenient for you, we're happy to have you in whatever order.
And I'm working here together. It's coming up. This is in the structure that's redeveloping. Sure.
So we're happy to have our DPW Director, Chase Berkeley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. So, you'd like to review the impacts of DPW?
Please, yeah.
From what we were discussing.
Looking
earlier?
at the potential cuts
Yeah,
that
so-
have been detailed to us.
So, in general, when we talk about reducing DPW services, you can talk about reducing services or eliminating them. So, I'll use tree planting, for example. We can stop planting new trees, or we can plant less trees. And that concept basically spreads to most of the functions that we have. We'll never just plow one side of your street, but obviously there's a lot of things we can cut back on. And with that, we cut back on the level of service that we provide to the residents. And it's always difficult because we have made significant investments in the equipment and personnel, and, you know, to turn that around 180 degrees is a tough call, but sometimes we have to make tough calls in our business. So what we looked at in the reductions that you have in front of you are basically an operating line to make payments to contractors for what I will call projects that are in between a capital project and a small project. So sometimes you'll see us in areas of town pave, not a whole street, but we may pave 50 feet of a street curb to curb and try to take out the worst piece of that street. So those kind of in-between type projects, so we cut that in half, so our ability to do that type of work around town. That's more of a reactive type of thing than a planned thing, so that's where it's a $250,000 line item in the DPW budget, so we halved it basically, and that was the majority of it. The other big component was we had talked at a previous meeting about steadily increasing our snow and ice budget because it is severely underfunded as it is, and it always runs in the red.
How did you do this year?
So, I'd hate to knock on too much wood in middle March, but
Yeah.
up until last Monday, we were in pretty good shape
I was
from
gonna say, yeah, it's been
a
easy.
size of storm perspective. But again, you know, the difference between a 6-inch storm and a 16-inch storm, the truck has a cost to roll down that street
Yeah.
either way. So, as a matter of inches, it doesn't always equate. But we were in good shape. Let's say so to have your first snow day in March is a good winter
Yeah,
by
yeah.
anyone's measure. So. But snow and ice, we had talked about rolling over 5 years up to a more realistic number. Still not where our average is, but getting a little bit closer. So we just took that off the table and we just level funded the snow and ice at $160,000.
How would we over that this year as your guesstimate?
Yeah, we're always over that basically. So our average is about $700,000. So you have to remember, we look for that difference in other places in the DPW
Yep.
budget at the end of the year. First, do some transfers between the budget that we control, and then if we have to go outside for a reserve fund transfer or to other departments that may have a surplus. So we're basically always stealing from ourselves to begin with to cover snow and ice. And so that basically that little piece of how we resolve things at the end of the year is just going to get slid to somewhere else. Just to keep in mind.
Okay.
So, and that was the three major components.
If you had to reduce by 10%, is it possible? I know the answer is you can't reduce and keep services where they are.
Right, so something has to take the...
Something would have to go.
So the things that have been discussed in years past are things like the recycle center opening only every other month, or cutting back on overtime for, you know, proactive things and going purely reactive. So we could do it, it's just a matter of deciding where our priorities are.
Any other questions?
I have a
Go ahead,
question and a
please.
comment. My question and then my comment. But I noticed that you guys were out in full force after this big storm, when the kids went back to school, and none of the sidewalks were plowed around Pierce Middle School, and so we had a lot of police officers out there. And so I'm curious to know how much that ended up costing us extra to have so many police officers out there, and why those sidewalks weren't plowed at all. And then I'm going to say something good. That's my comment.
Want me to answer that first?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so the sidewalks were plowed, they just weren't plowed by Tuesday morning. So we did get to them later in the event, but when we get more than about 8 inches of snow, the three sidewalk machines we have two different types of equipment on the front. One is a plow that handles
Okay,
about
thanks.
8 inches or less, and beyond that,
Slower.
it turns into a big snow blower, which the production is much slower.
Okay.
So an
Thank
event
you.
like Monday took us about 3.5 days with the equipment
Yep.
we have to get through all the sidewalks we promise we'll do.
Okay.
And that's just the nature of the size of the event.
And does the police, did it cost us extra to have the police, and you probably
I have
don't
to ask
know
the
this?
chief if he charged me.
Chief King is here.
It did not. Chase communicated with Mike Dennehy, who communicated with me.
Perfect.
And I reassigned staff to cover it at no cost.
Thank you so much, Chief. Now, my comment, I've seen nothing but great things from the Parks Department, including yourself. You've been extremely responsive. When I've called you and I've seen the crews out there clearing the snow at other times, and I just want to say you have done a stellar job, and I really appreciate the work of the DPW.
Oh, you're very well, and the credit all goes to the guys on the road, the men and women actually that are out there. They do all the heavy lifting.
Well, to you too.
Yeah.
Leadership is
really.
important.
Thank you.
So
All
thank
right.
you. Does anybody have any further questions? I mean, we are not excited about asking all these questions. But
Understood.
I'm glad you came because it helps us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chase.
Only a bunch of trees maybe get planted.
Maybe we can get donations.
Anybody got an
No, 'cause if we
arborist?
do, we're gonna die
Chief
before
Grant,
we
Chief
actually
King,
get planted.
up to you. Chief Grant, you're the man of the hour because we're all looking at new firehouses.
That's not in this budget.
It's not in this budget, mercifully.
Not my budget.
Mercifully, we don't have to talk about those while we're talking about
Oh, you're
making
on that
cuts of this
committee now, too,
magnitude.
so.
I am on the committee.
Yes.
But that's it.
So you have presented certain reductions also, and it looks as though we're looking at reduced training and buying back personal days and cutting back on equipment.
Yes, yeah.
What does that mean in terms of services and?
Well, it's $70,000 as a monetary figure. In the training end of it, it's, we'll have to be careful as to, it's mostly specialized stuff.
Such
Fire
as?
investigators.
Oh, I see, okay.
Our training officer, our fire prevention officer. There's different things that you want them to get out to and, stay up to date and increase skills. And, we'll just have to pick and choose what's most important on that line. Like Mike said, as far as the personal buyback goes, it is a contractual obligation, but we've got a pretty good track record of how much of those personal days do get bought back rather than just used. So we should be in pretty good shape on that one. And as far as the new equipment goes, I had discussed that with the subcommittee, the $15,000 there. That represented, we were actually looking to increase from $60,000, which is the height of where I've been at in my terms as chief. I've been there a number of times, and we've been cut below that a number of times. So it really kind of seemed like it was a time, just to grow that a little bit. We've got some higher tech items that it's time to start replacing. And in reality, what that may mean is that we have to replace those over more than one fiscal year.
Is that feasible and without compromising
Yes.
safety?
Without compromising safety to a significant degree, yes. What we've
Please don't have
done,
be my degree on my street. I mean, what's that?
that's
I mean,
the problem.
I think he's being very pragmatic about it.
Honestly, we've gotten to the point where, we've tried very hard to build all of our engines out so they're all redundant.
Yeah.
So that each one's stocked the same. So, somebody going to Bradley Road is getting the same service as someone going to Thatcher Street. In what we're going to have to replace, it may be, and the way we kind of keep it as safe as we possibly can is the first replacement item goes on this engine here, which is centrally located. And, say you had we're looking to replace the gas indicators, which will pick up the carbon monoxide. You get a carbon monoxide alarm in your home. We are still going to send the nearest engine. If the only meter is on this engine, they'll be running as well. So it certainly is a compromise, but, it's not absolutely crippling.
Other questions for the chief?
I really hope you get new fire stations. I heard about how they look right now from my other committee members, and
They are a sight to behold. I do believe we'll get there.
Yeah,
So,
we will get there. We don't have a choice. I think we have to. I think
It's,
there's a mandate for that. But the question
I
of
will say
operation-
it's a very talented committee that is working on it.
Well,
so.
it was very impressive. The presentation was very impressive, and
Yeah.
getting there will be terrific. But operationally, we still have to live until
Exactly.
until that day.
Exactly.
The Board of Health hasn't gone in there and just said they can't be occupied.
We're not going to talk about that. Don't
That's a
ask for
surprise,
problems.
trust
We've got
me.
enough of them. Okay. If there are no other-
Professional courtesy, right?
Well, we thank you for that. No more questions for the chief. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Jack?
Chief King, we're happy to see you. You've identified a bunch of cuts. And again, I asked the question, they're cuts that we see, and we're not sacrificing safety or letting bad guys run around town.
On my street only.
No, on all of our streets.
No, they're manageable cuts. You know, the budget itself was only a 1.2% increase, and
Yep.
now with cuts factored in, that where we're at would be a 1% then reduction back down. So I think that was.
Basically, it's almost level funding.
Yeah, essentially. So the cuts really come down to just a couple small areas. A third of it would come out of new equipment. Basically, that's cruiser replacements. We plan about 3 a year. They run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that has pretty standard for a long time been our wear and tear. Yep. There's variables to that. You have a cruiser accident, in a snowstorm or somebody, we've had 2 in the past year, but both of them, thankfully, were not our fault. They were hit by other motorists. So, sometimes it costs us that year, but eventually there's an insurance, that payment, but that goes back to the town.
So buying fewer cruisers, you'd reduce it from what to what?
Basically from 3 to 2
3 to 2.
under this cut. And then the remaining would come out of essentially overtime and a sick leave buyback. There's been a couple of changes that we can eliminate the sick leave buyback. Mike Denny's negotiated with the unions, basically eliminating that buyback, and with the changes of personnel, the last person to go under that will retire the end of this April. So anyone after that wouldn't be eligible.
Can you explain a little bit of how that has worked in the past and how it has changed? Because in the numbers, it comes out to a little over $35,000, the combined sick leave and overtime backfill.
Yeah.
How is that changed from what used to be in place?
So predominantly every member, the police have a lot of different unions, but essentially all the different unions, we have a patrol union, a supervisor's union, a manager's union, and a secretary's union. We have 4 unions, plus we have Chapter 13 non-union, like police cadets. Basically, they all had, different things in their contract, but essentially they all had some type of buyback if they didn't use sick time and they were to retire. And, the town has negotiated with all these unions and eventually, over time has removed this. So nobody's eligible except for people that were already in. So my last one in will come up this April 30th when they retire. So that buyback will be out this year, and we'll be able to eliminate that from next year's. The remaining is basically, a cut to the overtime backfill, which is about, a 6-7% cut. That's kind of a broad category. That the vast majority of that is backfilling shifts. Somebody takes a vacation day, somebody's out sick, somebody's on a Family Medical Leave Act, somebody's on a personal day. We backfill them to maintain man-in. There is some, I'll use the word discretionary, but, more unpredictable than discretionary overtime. You could have an investigation or something happens and somebody's held over their shift, things like that. Some of it's community policing efforts. If you have somebody assigned to some community policing mission that might be on their regularly scheduled day off, you have to pay them overtime. So that cut basically would be, we'd have to trim that in some way. I couldn't tell you specifically. The manageable cut, it's not going to cut the person who's responding to a 911 call, but it might come some type of, community event, whether, if we had, I'll make up the numbers, but if we had 8 officers, doing a dare camp with children, we might have to cut that to, 7 or 6 for the week. So it's manageable, but, it has an impact. So that's basically what those cuts come out at. Like I said, they would cut about 1% of the budget.
Questions for the chief?
So in terms of the buyback, would that not be in any budget going forward after all?
It wouldn't.
So that we're finished with
It's
it?
gone for
So we're
good.
done.
After this last one in the current year, April 30th, there's one coming up.
That's pretty much across the town. I think
Good.
mostly, it started when Anne Marie was in.
It did.
And, in terms of negotiating the contracts and,
Yep.
making a concerted effort to get rid of sick leave buyback.
No further questions? Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it.
Mike, if you have a couple minutes, maybe we can talk a little bit about the other budget, other budgets in the other departments. In terms of looking at any other places where there is the potential for a significant cost reduction without damaging services significantly. I mean, we're still kind of a way away.
Sure. A lot of it comes down to the level of service, right? That
Right.
I talked about it last week to this committee. And Chase touched upon it, Chief Grant and Chief King, not so much, but we see the product that they deliver to the town. It's a very high level of service. Quite honestly, that's not demanded, but represented in the town from the constituency. And it warrants it with the tax rates the way they are in town. So we're fully aware of that. Some of the other things we could cut, I touched upon it, if we were to go back to the library, Will would talk about closing the library on Saturdays, right? Which is, again, for a lot of people in this community, that's where they go. I think Will tell you most of the surrounding communities don't open their libraries on Sunday. So this is the place for not only people in this community, but people in other communities come here. So,
Sorry,
sure.
just on the library point, and the level of service especially, is there no way, are we looking for the shortest answer to the cut? Because Sunday seems like an easier answer, but is there a way to potentially reduce the amount of services Monday through Friday so that you save Saturday and Sunday? Because to the same point with little kids,
Right.
it's what we do to go.
Right.
And I know other people are using the library Monday through Friday. You could still keep it open, but there's a lot of staff in there every time that we do go. So are we going straight to Sunday's easy to get rid of, or are we looking more holistically and see if you can get 7 days a week with slightly reduced services?
I think it has to do with the collective bargaining agreement and the shifts that are allocated by the staff that's there. The last, not the event this past Monday, but the Monday before that, I think they decided to close the library at 2:00 because that's when the shift change occurred. So it's when the contractual employees are there, and I think Sunday's not necessarily the easiest time to cut, but it's a fill-in day, if you will.
And I would imagine it has something to do with the overtime concentration on Sunday, too.
No, I understand that, but it's also when you get a very negative
Right.
reaction to the cut,
Yeah.
so it feels a little bit like,
Yeah.
are you cutting that for the negative reaction so that there's more funding?
No,
You know what I mean?
no.
Or is it truly that's the
It was
only
thoroughly
cut?
flushed out by the Warrant Committee 2 years ago when they had the contingent, non-contingent,
Yep.
and that's where it was. And it was, if the referendum operational override hadn't passed, the libraries were closing. This isn't a bait and switch or a scare tactic. This is where he's decided, or the trustees have decided, what needs to take place. It's not just Will's decision. This is, yeah.
Is it also built into, to your point, or sorry, your whispered point that others might not have heard? Is that in the consideration for the next time you go into collective bargaining negotiations, that, it kind of holds our ability to be more flexible with hours hostage if we don't have
We're in
that flexibility?
negotiations with that union.
Oh, okay.
Right now?
Yes.
And what union is that?
It's the Milton Library
They
Association.
have their own
They have their own-
individual, they're
yes.
not part of a larger union, they're not part of an SEIU, they're nothing?
No.
Really?
Yeah, they have their own bargaining unit.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
And they're citizens of this town?
many.
Many of them are citizens of this town. And is that information that is public knowledge?
The collective bargaining agreement, it is,
Who's on the
yeah.
negotiating team?
Yeah, it should be, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
I mean,
Yeah.
from the library employees?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's available.
Thank you.
Yeah,
We talk a lot about cuts. Let's walk, since that's not everybody's favorite subject, let's talk about something that isn't some of our favorite subject, and that is looking into reserves and taking money out of free cash if we need to. What exists? How much can we spend? Where's the paying threshold? What would the board, the select board say? What would the school committee finance people say? What would Amy Dexter say about taking money? I don't want to say playing a shell game, but it is the town's money. We do need these services. We don't want to reduce beyond a certain threshold level. What do you think?
Before I answer that question, can I talk about some other things on the town side that
Hold
we?
on one
Yeah.
second, though. You said something about how the services that were required and demanded by the constituents of this town, which was police, fire, all those things you just listed, I'd also like to add to that the schools.
Oh, yeah.
are
Oh,
doing.
most definitely. No, 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 no.
So you just
Yeah.
didn't say that word, so I
No,
just want to
no.
make sure.
I have 5 children in the Milton Public School
Yeah.
system, full
Yeah, yeah,
disclosure,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. He's
That-
a
yeah.
believer.
Yeah, no, I thought we were just up here to talk about the
No, no,
town
no,
stuff.
no, we're
Yeah.
looking at everything now, but go ahead, Frank, go ahead.
So, we made a commitment 2 years ago to reinvest in trees, street
Right.
trees in town.
Right.
Right, to the capital, both from a capital perspective and an operational
Yeah.
planting perspective. And we tried to make sure it was in both budgets, right? And we've done a very good job, and we've gotten a lot of attaboys, if you will, because trees are appearing in places where they used to, and for one reason or another went away.
Yeah.
And we planted 400 to 500 trees in the last 2 years, which is exceptional,
Yep.
because the Shade Tree Advisory Committee spent a lot of time. Long story short, that's something we may have to scale back, not eliminate, but, maybe we do 100 trees this year and not 200 trees. Knowing that every dollar helps get us to that
Yep.
more balanced point. But we haven't had the deep dive into the free cash discussion yet. We tiptoed through it last week with my finance subcommittee. But it is for a larger discussion. I think there's a lot of balls in the air, if you will.
Understood.
Should we get the gift for the fire building? I think that $670,000 that we had put towards free cash would become available.
And that would solve the
Might
problem.
become available, and if you do the math.
It solves
right,
the problem.
It solves the problem for this year.
For this
right?
year.
Yeah, makes it worse for next year.
But is
It's
it,
like
but
to
is
think
it,
longer term.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I think that's something that we all have to bring forward, particularly now because we're running out of options. But I think wouldn't it nice to have that gift and have that announced quickly? But the simple reality is that we can't expect it to happen. And so the question of looking at what reserves might be available, where the threshold for the town to spend them is, and have that conversation so that if it is necessary for us to think about that, to make that a consideration when we finalize our recommendations, we can do it in an informed sense.
Right. I've been told by many longer-standing members of town meeting, while I was toiling around in city council in Boston, that the appetite for layoffs is outweighed by the use of free cash for stabilization funds, and that they would frown upon layoffs if you're going to put money away for a rainy day. So
Yeah.
that's the consensus I'm being told.
Again, I think it's something that we should look at. I think we shouldn't be afraid of it because it's there for a reason, and if not now, then when?
And it hits home the larger issue,
Yeah.
which is we need a plan. We need to really take a look at what we're gonna do 5 years, 10 years.
Right.
If we dip into the rainy day fund this year, we can't, it's not.
But I
it's not
also
sustainable.
think this makes the case for the chief financial officer position almost
Totally
airtight.
agree.
Because this is the job of a chief financial, having been one, this is what you do. You look forward, you figure out what your needs are, you figure out what you really can do, how you're gonna raise your revenue, and where you don't spend when you don't need to.
Yes.
And I think this is a critical issue at this juncture. And if anybody out there in TV land is watching, this is a fill-up to that discussion and for that referendum question to come up. If we had any thoughts that a chief financial officer job was not essential, I think this discussion proves that it is very, very plainly. And yeah, it's time we come into the 21st century with that sort of management. Shade trees notwithstanding, they're all lovely, and they'll be here 100 years from now. But we have to make sure that the town is here from at that point. Tom?
So, no, I totally agree on the finance position being necessary, but in terms of using either free cash or our reserves, first of all, we're violating every financial policy that we have in this damn town if we use our reserves without some kind of a plan to replace them. And that's why they've never been used, because there is no plan. There is no way to generate revenue to replace it.
This is why we have a discussion. If we're going to use them, we have to find out how we're going to put them back.
Exactly.
Right.
And
so this
nobody's ever been able to figure it out yet.
if we don't start talking about it, then it'll never happen.
Yeah, if it's not a rainy day, it's certainly damp, and there's
I
been
think-
a
It's
problem
raining.
that's been happening, developing for years, that's a structural problem with finances. We
Right,
don't
that's the
have
problem. We do
revenues
have a
to
structural
cover
deficit.
we do that.
And
Don't
by
have-
its very nature, there is no, it's unsustainable.
It is. It is.
So unless we can figure out a way to get out of a get out, get out of that deficit, it's just a losing battle.
Well, I
Things
mean,
have got to change.
well, the option is continually increasing property taxes for residents, which nobody's in favor of. I mean, if we started to beat that drum, I think we'd have our houses spray painted. But I think that the issue is really beyond that. I think it's how do you
You're getting
generate...
near critical mass.
Yeah,
You're getting near critical mass in
and-
terms of property taxes.
Yeah, and the question is beyond that, going forward, to have, once again, the issue of the payment in lieu of taxes discussion. Again, nobody really wants to go aggressively on that for a number of different reasons, but I don't know that there's an option really at this point to continue to back burner that. But again, that's a little bit down the way. So the question would be, if we did have a sense of taking several $100,000 out of the general fund, out of the free cash, out of reserves, what is it going to be applied to, and how is it going to go back? And is there a plan for that? Because I think it would be a lot easier for us to go to town meeting with those answers than just say we're just going to take it out and hope for the best.
Right, and it's the second piece of that question that's the hardest. If there's the structural deficiencies that I was made aware of when I first took this job, and I haven't told too many people this, but if the override hadn't have passed, I may have reconsidered taking this position, because it was a breath of fresh air that was needed.
Yeah.
Now we're, 24 months later, and, Brian mentioned.
A lot
Brian
sooner
Beaupre
than any of us
mentioned-
anticipated.
Temporary band-aid on a recurring problem.
Yeah,
It's been
well,
happening for years.
Again, we didn't anticipate the health insurance issue coming up, but that's secondary. The issue is it exists and we have to address it. I think then that we certainly have seen some very good work in taking some of the increases down so that we're certainly within striking distance, and certainly on a percentage basis. I mean, they're regrettable, and I don't think anybody is happy about it, certainly, but I think we'd be a lot less happy if we didn't have these discussions. Tom?
One thing I'd like to know is, whether you get the, is it Cook and Company that's our consultant on health insurance?
Correct.
Get a representative in from there to come talk to us, but what is driving the increase in the health insurance cost? Is it claims? Is it just increased enrollment? Is it a combination of both? And looking out, is this a continuing problem for the next few years, or is this just a one-shot deal? I mean, what is it?
Well, you were on the Board of Selectmen when they did the plan changes
Redesign,
last time,
yes, yeah.
right? You worked your way through 80-20 to 78-22.
Right, but
to
we weren't talking
76-24.
these kind of increases either. We were talking, 5s, 6s, and 7s.
Yeah, these are systemic
Well,
increases.
well,
too. This is
the
seeing-
plan today hasn't changed from the plan when you were on the Board of Selectmen. It's still the same
Right.
plan, right? So it's the plan design.
Yeah, we
that
haven't
is-
changed plan design.
Right, it's the
And we
plan-
really didn't do much from plan design. The last time we changed plan design was, Kevin Murren was still town administrator. That was the last plan design. We had a split.
So that is what has remained constant throughout all of this, both the split portion that you guys helped negotiate. So it is the plan design itself. And that's why, I don't know if you were on the board when they enacted 32B, 21, and 22.
Yes.
But that is what the IAC is talking about.
Did our consultant tell us that we were under-reserved?
No.
He did not,
No.
or she did not, he or she
Right.
did not.
We're in that healthy 20 to 30% range
Okay,
right now.
so...
But won't be at 16%.
Won't be based upon actuarial assumptions, ages of the employees?
Annual claims, $10 to $15 million in claims.
Okay. And at what point will we reach a margin that is unacceptable? Because I'm thinking, if there is any place that we should look at a reduction, it might be in that insurance piece, which is the budget buster, frankly. Is there any way to skewer that back a little bit?
So I could get them here to speak to you. They are speaking to my board in executive session on Wednesday night.
Are they?
Yeah.
This coming Wednesday? Could
Yeah,
they come and
well-
talk to us Wednesday?
They're
Or
coming to my board and the school committee in executive session.
What time? Because we're planning to meet Wednesday. We have an agenda for Wednesday as well.
I don't think you can because you're not posted for our executive session. We're at the Council on Aging.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. But I can have them in shortly thereafter, so that they're bringing stuff to us on Wednesday. and enlightening both the school committee and my board with an update.
All right.
So is it utilization, is that what I'm understanding, in terms of the claims that we're seeing? And that's what's causing the reserve to drive?
It's a very rich plan.
Okay.
The town's plan is a
Right.
very rich
And
plan.
so we're self-insured?
Self-insured, and Cook and Company represents a lot of municipalities.
Yep, right.
And they've informed us that the plan that we have is very rich.
And do we have a stop loss on it?
Yes. Yeah, Blue Cross is the stop-loss carrier. I don't know what the threshold is, but
Yeah.
how much? 140?
40?
So we carry.
Could I ask?
Kevin, please.
So, is our plan, town plan consistent with, other communities? I know you mentioned, what's the split from employee, employer? And then how does our plan
That's a great
design
question, yes.
rate versus?
So it's 7624 right now. The $18,000 I referenced earlier that's the taxpayer's contribution, that's for the family plan. And the employee picks up 24% of that. When I left Boston 2 years ago, it was 75-25.
Yep.
That's pretty
so-
standard.
Yep.
Yeah, and it took a lot to get from 80-20 to 76-24, quite honestly. You can imagine, yeah.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by very rich?
I would prefer to let Cook and Company. Yeah. Very few deductibles.
I
Yeah.
understand.
Yep.
So when does that get reevaluated?
So January, the health group insurance plan with all unions except for one expires December 31st. So we can't make a plan design change until January 1st.
In this budget that you're looking at right now, you're looking at it continuing with the current plan that we have. I understand that the GIC or GIC is not a happy subject.
It's not an option at this time.
It is not.
No.
Is it ever going to be an option?
It is if my board adopts section 23 of section
Which is what you talked about
Chapter
last time you were
32,
here.
yeah.
Right.
So that's what we have to wait for.
21 and 22 is not GIC, 23 is GIC.
23 is GIC.
Okay.
And we asked Cook and Company to take a good look at some of the other communities. People talk about
Yeah.
Arlington, they talk about Lexington, they have GIC.
And the problem
Exactly.
with
We're
GIC
not
that-
at that point, and that's not part of the discussions with the IAC.
Right, right.
It's just chapter,
And the
section.
returns on the GIC are mid-single digits at this point, if you're lucky, so
We'll still be saving.
it's something, right? Okay.
Except
Anybody have any other questions for our
firing
town
people.
administrator?
Is there a way, or who would be responsible for looking at fees? Anything like that? Is there ways to
Fees, increasing fees in certain,
in any at all? Because they haven't been reviewed in decades.
are you talking fees for like marriage licenses and things
Any
like that?
fees.
In
Yeah,
town?
Chief
So
King
it's
and
a
I
structural
talked about
problem.
looking
Is
at- right?
bad on the revenue side.
Yeah, Chief King and I looked at talked today about looking into the parking fines. It can get this
Inspection
mundane, believe it or
services.
not.
Yes, absolutely.
If you have this many tickets left,
Yeah.
that say it's $25 for a fine,
Mm-hmm.
right? It would probably be in your best decision to use all of these first and not eat that cost of reprinting all of these.
Right.
So that's part of the process as well. So he was gonna go back and find out where they stand from a
That's not good.
ticketing
You can do a
perspective.
break-even analysis on what it would cost. to
Yeah,
print
I mean,
them up.
so preliminarily, we're looking into it, but that's part of the break-even
And
analysis.
how do we
I mean.
stand, compared to other communities?
Yeah.
I mean, it's-
I might agree
about
with Clinton
average.
last time when he said we're not Boston, right?
No,
We're
clearly not Boston,
Right.
but,
But how many
we're
man hours is it
Holbrook,
gonna
we're
cost
Hingham,
us
we're,
to look into this for a minimal increase? I mean,
No, it's,
seriously.
yeah, no, it's
This
minimal.
is-
But,
this is-
this, for the same reason that we're also looking into how much we pay for stickers, right?
Yeah.
If
I
we
know.
go to the trash barrel, how much are we gonna save by not,
Couple 100,000.
I hope not. Well, no, just just all of the costs that are associated with a sticker program,
Right,
right? Can
right.
you anticipate 3/4 of the stickers, weekly
Yes.
stickers not being purchased?
Right.
What's your savings there?
Right.
Can you appreciate annual stickers not having to
Absolutely.
be purchased anymore? And Chief King's doing the same thing
Inspection
with
services.
his program.
All of
Christine, you had a question?
You talked about scaling back some of the projects that are kind of up and running, like the shade trees.
Yes.
What's the scale? Like, what are we talking about in terms of savings and something like that for them? Not that one, but the whole.
So it's funded for $40,000 in capital this year, and it was $25,000 in operations. We would talk about taking 15 of that and making it around $50,000 investment in trees rather than 65.
So even if you went around and found all those little things you could scale back, it's not gonna be a significant amount of money.
I didn't think we'd get to this number, the 565 number,
pretty
but
good,
we're
actually.
literally, we're talking, I mentioned it before, we're talking about postage and we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah. I know.
very mundane things like, you know,
Paper clips.
reducing the training in the Board of Assessors office for
I
$200.
understand that.
And we did get to 565, so,
So
I think we
little
continue
here and
to-
there.
It's yeoman's work. I mean, sir, you've done a great job.
So last question, I think, is, all right, we are within striking distance of where we need to be in order, I'm thinking practically what we have to do in the next 10 days in the time that's allotted. Is it likely we will see another revision in either the revenue figure or the budget? Because when we get together, we either have to take the numbers that we have or see something that is going to be revised closer to where we need to be before we say, we recommend X.
10 days.
Yeah, so both the schools and the town side understand what that new number is.
Right.
We've started out, again,
Okay.
don't want to, yes.
All right, that's the short answer. So we would like to see that ASAP, because we have people running all over the country, literally all over the world, some of us, in the next 7 days. So by next Monday, we have to vote. So, yes, we do.
Right.
That's the dirty little secret.
So I'm
and that's
indisposed next
unfortunate.
Monday, but I will get you everything, you know, we met preliminary today, we can put something on piece
That
of
will be
paper.
very helpful,
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
will have meetings. We posted for next Wednesday.
This
For this Wednesday coming, I mean, this coming Wednesday.
Post for Saturday.
And we have to
would they
post
be
for
available?
Saturday in the event that we need that as well. But as soon as we have that, that'd be very helpful, because we want to get cracking and get this done and put it so that it's not going to be a surprise to anybody, and it's going to be, concisely, cogently, and clearly put in front of the town meeting so that they can see the issues that we're all facing.
Right,
And if we have to meet on Saturday, will you be available?
I will.
Thank you. I'm
What
sorry.
is there- what
It
is-
saves me from a hockey game in Marlboro.
What would be the potential for substantial updates from the town and the school by
The
Saturday?
School, yeah.
Yeah, town side, I can get you, yeah.
Yeah.
Meet Friday morning? Yeah.
That would be helpful.
So
As long as there's
so there'd be
circulating,
something by Saturday.
we'll post it for it.
Yes.
And whoever can come,
But I
comes.
meant, would they have time to actually make changes
But
by Saturday?
we will have to vote next Monday.
Yes.
On these articles. We don't have a choice.
So we're not gonna have a chance to meet with the Cook people?
That's a good question. The insurance people, the cooking company, what do you?
Let me check with Paige tomorrow
See what
morning.
their
the
availability is.
Assistant Town Administrator, yeah.
Because again, we do have a meeting Wednesday, and that could come under new business if we needed to, if they're free.
I mean,
You know, they're gonna be here
they-
I
anyway,
think
right?
they're-
What time do you meet Wednesday?
7.
7.
They can.
So we probably won't get to them until closer to 7:30. I could ask if Paige could come down here and they could give you
15 minutes would help.
subject matter
Yep,
expertise.
yep, yep. And then we can point them in your direction, and
Sure.
everybody's happy, so they make one trip to town. And,
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
efficient
that makes
for them.
sense. Sure.
If you can do that, that'd be very
Yeah.
helpful.
They
We'll put
meet
the-
at
we'll just split the
6:30.
agenda and put them on
They meet at
first.
6?
They meet at 6:30.
He just
No,
said
we have
7.
3 public hearings.
Yes,
We have
four.
3 public hearings. We won't get to the public agenda, the public meeting agenda,
Yeah,
till
because
probably
you said
about
you're in
7:30.
executive session for a
Yeah,
bit.
sorry,
Yeah, so
you're,
that's
on the
good.
calendar, you're posted at
Okay,
6:30, so that's.
so I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thank
Okay.
you all for coming. Schools,
Thank you.
fire, DPW, police, we're grateful for your work. It's, this is an iterative process, I think, for all of us, and we'll all do the best we can. So, in terms of our schedule, we have all of this to look at. I would ask all of you who are responsible for the different budget components to start thinking about how you want to present this. So as we finish up this Wednesday, Saturday, and into next Monday, we'll have to draft very quickly to get these in to Lynn to get them out to the printer. So we will be under a little bit of pressure next week.
How brief is this?
Brief.
Is it like similar to what we did with
It's
the,
very similar to that, because they're numbers, and the numbers do speak for themselves. You just say why the numbers are where they are, and to say because of the budget issues that we have faced and the revenue, blah, blah. I'll put that into the introduction, which is going to go into some detail about the structural problem that is really something we have to face very, very quickly.
Okay.
So that part is, I've already started.
Okay.
But the individual articles will need, I think there's 30-something of them at this point.
Yeah, 36. Would it be helpful if I posted last year's warrant?
Yes.
On
Yeah,
the shared
everybody gets an
document?
idea.
sample or something like
They're
that
not-
would be
They don't
good.
have to be exhaustive unless they're terrifically, unless there are detailed issues. The school department is always the longest, because it's the most complex part of the budget.
right.
I forgot what it's called, but what the moderator did by lumping articles?
Oh, yeah,
Is he
the
able
roll,
to do
in the
that?
roll, he will probably do that for some of them.
And which one, would we have an idea from
No,
him
that's
which
not
I don't know
ones
which ones. I
that
think
would
it's gonna
help?
be the smaller ones. that are
Yes,
just-
but
yeah.
it may help.
Well, I'll ask him.
Can I ask Lynn? Lynn, do you have somebody for each one of the 36 articles as the lead?
No.
Okay, so I'm offering, I am not gonna be working, for a little bit, taking some time, just
Good
to,
for
you know, enjoy life. And I'd be willing to, I don't have anything this weekend. So if there are things that you really don't see, and Mr. Chair, to you too,
If you are willing to help out, because
I'm willing to
I
help
often
out.
do those, which nobody else
I'm willing
does.
to help out.
But if you're on a
So-
subcommittee for the...
But you need to tell me what
Yeah.
to do, and
Yeah,
I'll
we
do
can
it by
that.
the
That's
deadline.
perfect.
I meet the
We
deadline.
we do have, if you are on a subcommittee, just please talk, I'm going to do the Saturday Night Live, talk amongst yourselves
Yep.
as to who should be drafting it, because I don't want to come up to the day before and saying, oh, well, you know, we thought that one was going to do it. I feel like
Yep.
the Scarecrow and the Wizard of Oz, go this way. We can't have that
And it
this
needs
time
to be
around, because
reviewed
it needs to be
and
reviewed, and we
fact-checked.
have to get it right, that too, but we have to do it right, because we owe that much to the town meeting.
Yes.
As you're writing these things up, most of your time is going to be spent on the cuts and the
Yes.
impact of the cuts. Because there's really very little upward change in this.
That's
First of all,
exactly right.
there's no salary increases
Right.
in most of the budgets.
Because they're not contractual.
Because they're all out of contract, yeah.
Right. So you're talking about, you know, why we had to reduce, and
Yep.
we all know why we had to reduce, so. Anyway, if there's is there any new business? Let me ask that
I
question.
actually have one thing.
Yes,
So
please.
just if there's any citizens who want to get information on our agendas, they can go to townofmilton.org/subscribe, where you can find the drop-down for warrant committee agendas.
Excellent. And they could see our minutes there also?
They can also see on the town website the minutes for our
Very good.
meetings. as well.
Okay. So all you people out there in TV land, if you're interested, that's the go-to. Tom?
Yeah, Lynn, could we possibly see if we can get on the town sides, somebody to work on just getting all of these warrant articles together in one place, so they're not just all over the place?
Because we have...
I would, normally, back in the day, we would get an entire,
In
they'd
hard
be
copy.
numbered.
Yeah.
No, well, they'd be electronic, that's fine, but they were all in one place,
Yeah.
they were all
They're all
numbered.
over the place.
You know,
They're all numbered.
Have they been enumerated?
No. They have not been
don't even
enumerated
been-
yet.
The index has not been approved.
It hasn't been...
yeah,
finalized.
doesn't matter, as long as they're all in one place and numbered consecutively, so you can,
And we can
you all know what we're talking
bring
about.
votes, which is what we did last year. We had that by this time last year, so we're really kind of behind the eight ball. So we'll make that request, that we get that for our next Monday meeting, certainly, and preferably before that, so we can all look at it.
And that being said, too, I know we've got a few articles that we could probably vote now, or, we probably should get those things voted out of the way, like the rescinding article, and,
Oh, that's true, that's true. Do we all have that
Yeah.
language, by the way?
Yeah,
We
that's-
could do that.
Are those final languages?
I think they are.
Don't know if they're final, but we can certainly vote on them. We can do at least 3 of them. So that's not a bad idea. Let me pull it up right now. So,
We get the extending of the bylaw,
that we don't know what, the problem is we don't know the number.
I always print my stuff here.
We don't have, but maybe if we go to, we have the index pages, greeting of the index pages,
So if you go into the folder,
but we don't have the actual language for them.
right, you should have shared community files, annual town meeting, and then they're how I receive them.
Right.
So I think halfway down, you'll see article to revote to extend term,
Right.
so that should be, I believe, the correct language.
Okay, do you want to read that out?
To see if the town will vote to extend the term of the Town Bylaw Review Committee and to delete the following text from the vote of the 2015 Annual Town Meeting under Article 43, which authorized the town moderator to appoint the Town Bylaw Review Committee, with the exception of Chapter 10, known as the Zoning Bylaw, Chapter 13, known as the Personnel Administration Bylaw, Chapter 15, known as the Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 21, known as the Stormwater Management Bylaw, and to act on anything relating thereto.
Does anybody know how long that they wanted that extended for? He mentioned it when he came and talked to us.
or anybody talking to us.
I don't remember.
I think it was 2 years.
It was not long. I think
wasn't long,
It was
yeah.
short.
Two at the most.
Yeah, I don't think it was anything beyond that.
It wasn't long, I know.
No,
But
it was only 1 or 2 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
I mean,
Because
I-
it dropped off all those other.
I'd be happy to make the motion, but I want to make it for the amount of time that he wanted. That's all.
It doesn't mention it anymore.
No, it doesn't.
And it should.
It actually should, or at least we should be able to explain what it is in the comment.
Right.
Well, we'd make it in the recommendation. We recommend that it be
Right,
Yeah.
2 years, 1 year, 18 months, whatever it is.
right. I think Aaron's getting that information. What number is that being in the index at this point?
I don't want to say because the index is
It's
very
not
loose
complete.
at right now.
It is very loose. So we just have to make sure that we know that we would have voted on that particular one and assigned it a number.
Right.
2 years.
2 years, okay, we're right.
So I will make a motion to, let me get back to the damn thing again.
Sorry, is there any cost associated with that committee?
No, it's a volunteer
No.
committee.
No, I don't think so, no.
Find it again, hang on. Couldn't just. Damn it. I'll be with you. 1 second. Shoot. Not my computer, and it keeps asking for passwords.
Isn't that annoying? You have to
It
set
is.
it every 90 days. or whatever.
1, 2, 3.
Not the second time. So I think right now, this is considered to be, no, this isn't, is this Article 5 at this point?
Well,
No,
nothing's been,
no, I'm just trying to,
oh, because you gotta put a title on it.
yeah. How are you doing there, Tom?
I got it.
Okay.
It's the board.
Okay, so I'll make a,
Extension of the bylaw committee.
I'll make a motion.
Bylaw Review Committee.
I'll make a motion that we extend the Town Bylaw Review Committee for a term of an additional 2 years. And I guess that's all we really need.
Okay, technically, at this point, it's numbered as Article 36. Right. So we have a motion on the floor. Is there any, do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes. So that's amended general bylaws. Next, do we want to talk the home rule petition, prudent investment of trust assets?
I don't even have that one right now. We've got the article rescind, though, we could do
Okay.
that. That one's
Who wants to read it out?
pretty basic.
Do you have it?
Yeah,
Tom, you can read it out
to see if the
quickly?
town will, see if the town will vote to rescind certain authorized but unissued portions of amounts authorized to be borrowed to pay costs of the following projects.
All right.
And we go across town meeting vote, article number, description, amount authorized, amount to be rescinded. So the first one is May 3rd, 2010, Article 21. It was a sewer bond authorization for $500,000. There's $28,000 left, and we want to rescind it. Next one is May 8th, 2014, Article 21, another sewer authorization for $485,000, which is $218,250 unissued and
May move to accept as read.
rescinded.
Yes.
May move to accept as read.
Sure. I'll read the rest of them real quickly. 2000 town meeting, fire building improvements, $145,000 was never used, be rescinded. And 2015 town meeting, Article 5, DPW locker room construction, $200,000 authorized, $2,404 to be rescinded. 2016 town meeting, Article 6, sewer mechanical rotting machine, $18,000 authorized, was never used, $18,000 to be rescinded. And Article 22 of the 2016 sewer project, $914 authorized, $685,500 to be rescinded. 2017 school science wing roofing project, $197,000 authorized, $54,000 to be rescinded. And finally, 2017 town meeting, Article 28, another sewer project, 914,000 authorized, 685,500 to be rescinded.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept that?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Easy one. Article 4 that I have here is the authorized discharge of the legislative committee. That's,
Oh, we're gonna get rid of that?
We had a question on
I
that.
wanna
We
hold
did-
up on that one.
Yeah, we didn't know why. I mean,
Yeah, I don't
what it did in the
understand
first
I'm with
place.
Tom.
Oh, the legislation,
yeah.
What it did in the
That's
first
the whole
place.
delegation, though, and what
Well,
we're supposed to be doing with
And I
the
looked on the
state.
town website, you look at the
Doesn't have
committees,
much,
all
no.
it has is the town council.
Right.
So,
Right.
Well,
So,
I mean, we
what does
don't
it
know if
do?
it was
Yeah.
some sort of.
So it's probably fine, I just don't know what its
Yeah.
purpose was,
We don't know.
and if it's got any
Yeah,
purpose.
Its
Maybe
purpose
as
was
a
to be
committee
a
to do something.
liaison from the town to the legislation, to the legislature.
Yeah.
To the town, so they were gonna make sure that they were overseeing any
And
home rule
everybody's talking to
petitions,
everybody else.
all that other stuff.
Overall, that's a good thing.
I
Yes.
agree with you.
Probably need one of those, but.
Yeah.
Right, considering that we don't, never see our delegation, so, you know, I'd really appreciate that. So I'm questioning why we're getting rid of it. Nobody wants to be on it? I volunteered to be on it.
Okay, well, remember that. Okay, so we'll shelf that one. The other one is the home rule petition for prudent investment of trust
Exactly.
assets.
I can't hear what you're saying.
It's technically Article 35, home rule petition, prudent investment of trust assets. These are these are the non-budget ones. We
Yeah,
handled the
I think
non-budget
that
ones
one,
with the
we
other
can
ones.
probably vote. I mean,
I think we can vote on that one. If you have the text and you want to read it out, that'd be great.
let me see if I have it.
We do have that, don't we?
So chopped, like piecemeal.
You pull it out faster than I can, I think.
What is it called?
Home rule petition, prudent investment of trust assets. It's effectively morphing what was heavily regulated into called a prudent person rule for investment, so that you're not taking the money to Las Vegas.
Yeah, I
The
think
town's
we have
money and putting it down in the roulette wheel of Foxwoods. But you're not required
At
to
least
keep it in
the
munis.
state.
Well, you're not required to keep it in extremely low
We'll go to
low
MGM in
volatility.
Springfield.
Yeah, whatever.
No.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, okay, I have it.
Go ahead.
I assume it's the same one.
Yep.
To see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to file a petition with the general court in substantially the following form, provided that the general court may reasonably vary the form and substance of the requested legislation within the scope of the general public objectives of the petition. An act authorizing certain investments by the treasurer of the town of Milton, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives in the general court assembled and by authority of the same as follows. Section 1, notwithstanding Section 54, Chapter 44 of the general laws or any other general law, special law to the contrary, the treasurer of the town of Milton may invest trust funds that are in the custody of the treasurer in securities that are listed on the S&P or Standard & Poor's 100 index, the S&P 100. Section 2, this act shall take effect upon its passage. As submitted by the Board of Selectmen.
It's a very conservative
I just have a
investment
weird
approach.
question. When we vote in, if the town votes in a CFO,
CFO.
Right.
do we have to go back through and change all this language?
I wouldn't think so.
No, we'll
because-
still have a treasurer.
Yeah.
It'll be an
Oh,
appointed
okay.
treasurer and
Yeah.
a,
Okay.
Yeah.
well,
Thank you.
they're two different.
The two
But
different
we're
functions.
fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, the two different
So
functions.
moved.
Yeah.
And what?
Do we have a
making that happen?
second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passed. All right, so we have one question left on what now is Article 4, the bond, the discharge of the Legislative Committee, which we'll ask for an answer on. And then next Monday, I hope we'll be able to vote on these other articles. Most of them are perfunctory, based on what they have. The particularly important ones will be any reductions that come through. So, we are done for this evening. Thank you so much for sitting through this, what has turned into a marathon session. We're almost at the light is at the end of the tunnel. So, there being no new business, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Do we have an agenda?